Kate demands to see Guard's report. What he witnessed with Charlotte changes everything. Kate had spent the last few months in a whirlwind of confusion and frustration, trying to piece together the truth behind her sister Charlotte's case. Charlotte had been accused of a crime she insisted she didn't commit. Kate had always believed in her sister's innocence, but as the days passed, the weight of the evidence seemed to stack up against Charlotte. It was becoming harder to ignore the growing doubts that haunted her. The case was centered around a strange incident at a high-end art gallery in the heart of the city. Charlotte had been found at the scene when a well-known businessman was seriously injured, but the circumstances surrounding the event were murky. There were reports of an argument, a struggle, and then an explosion of chaos that led to the businessman's collapse. Charlotte's fingerprints were found on the weapon, but she couldn't remember what had happened that night. She had been drunk, confused, and terrified, claiming someone else was responsible for the attack. Yet no one else was found at the scene. Kate couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She knew her sister. Charlotte had always been a quiet, gentle soul, not the kind of person who would lash out in anger. Kate had been with her the night before the incident, and she knew Charlotte wasn't the kind to get involved in dangerous situations. There had to be more to the story, and Kate was determined to find out what it was. It wasn't until one evening, after another exhausting day at the courthouse, that Kate decided she had enough. She had been battling the legal team, trying to get them to dig deeper, trying to get them to question the assumptions that were shaping the case. But everyone around her seemed to accept the version of events that painted Charlotte as guilty. That night, Kate sat in her small apartment, thinking about how she could change the course of the investigation. She knew she needed to take matters into her own hands. It was then that she made the decision. She needed to see the full report from the security guard who had been working at the art gallery on the night of the incident. Kate had heard the name before. Tom, the night shift security guard, had been one of the first to witness what had happened. But the details of his report had never been fully explored. It was a strange feeling demanding the report, but Kate was desperate for any clue that could help her sister. She had to know what Tom had seen and what his observations could reveal. The following morning, Kate made a call to the prosecutor's office. After a few attempts to navigate the red tape, she finally spoke with the assistant who handled the case. She didn't ask for much, just the security guard's report. After some hesitation, the assistant promised to have it sent over. It wasn't the breakthrough Kate was hoping for, but it was a start. When the report arrived, Kate could hardly contain her excitement. She sat down at her kitchen table, the report in her hands, and began to read it carefully. The guard's account of the night was brief but intriguing. He had written that he had been monitoring the security cameras in the gallery when he noticed something odd. Around midnight, Charlotte had been seen leaving the building alone. According to Tom, she seemed disoriented, almost as if she had been in a daze. But then, the report took an unexpected turn. Tom had written that he had seen someone else with Charlotte. The mysterious figure was not identified, but Tom described them as wearing a long, dark coat. At first, this might not have seemed like much, but the fact that Tom had even mentioned this figure meant that something unusual had happened. The report suggested that Charlotte had been in the company of someone who hadn't been accounted for by the police or any other witnesses. This wasn't just a random mention. It was a significant detail that hadn't been followed up on by anyone else. Kate read the lines over and over again. What was going on? Why hadn't anyone else noticed this? Charlotte had always kept to herself, never speaking about anyone who might have been with her that night. The mystery figure was a lead, a possible explanation for the events that had unfolded. But who were they? And why hadn't the police questioned this person? Kate's thoughts began to race. She knew she couldn't sit on this information. She had to meet with Tom in person to ask him more questions, to get more details. But before she did that, she took one more look at the report. Something else caught her eye. Tom had mentioned that Charlotte had left the gallery around 11:45 p.m., but the timeline didn't line up with the other reports. According to the police, the incident had occurred much later, close to 1:00 a.m. If Charlotte had left the building so much earlier, then what had happened in the time between? This discovery only deepened the mystery. Charlotte's defense team had been focused on the details of the fight, the weapon, and the injuries. But what if the real story was hidden in the gaps? The missing time, the unidentified person, and the confusion surrounding what had happened between the time Charlotte had left the building and when the incident occurred. Kate felt a strange sense of urgency. Her sister was in danger, and if she was going to get her out of this mess, she needed to act fast. Kate had always trusted her instincts, and right now, they were telling her that there was more to this case than anyone realized. Charlotte had been keeping secrets, but so had the people around her. It was time to dig deeper, and Kate was willing to do whatever it took. The next morning, she made her plan. She would meet with Tom, the guard, in person. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let her sister go down for something she didn't do. And if there was any chance that Tom's testimony could help, then Kate would find a way to get to the truth. The meeting was scheduled for the afternoon. Tom had agreed to meet her at a small coffee shop near the gallery, a quiet place where they could talk without distractions. Kate arrived early, her mind racing with questions. What if Tom didn't want to talk? What if he had seen something that he wasn't willing to share? But she couldn't afford to back down now. This was the lead she had been waiting for, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. When Tom arrived, Kate recognized him immediately. He was a quiet, unassuming man in his mid-40s, with short, neatly combed hair and a nervous air about him. He looked out of place in the coffee shop, like someone who wasn't used to being in the spotlight. But Kate could tell that he was the key to unlocking the mystery. They sat down at a corner table, and Kate wasted no time. She asked him about the night of the incident, about what he had seen, and about the person he had witnessed with Charlotte. Tom was hesitant at first, but Kate was persistent. Finally, after several long moments of silence, he spoke. "I didn't want to get involved, not at first," Tom admitted, his voice low. "But when I saw Charlotte with that person, I knew something wasn't right. I recognized them, but I didn't know who they were at the time. I just knew they didn't belong." Kate listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. Tom had recognized the person Charlotte had been with, but he hadn't spoken up until now. He didn't know why, but Kate felt like this was the moment that would change everything. The truth was finally coming to light. As they continued to talk, Tom revealed more details. He hadn't been able to see the person's face clearly, but he remembered the distinctive coat they wore, a long, dark coat that seemed out of place in the warm weather that night. Tom also mentioned that he had seen them speaking to Charlotte, though he hadn't been able to hear their conversation. But the way Charlotte had acted around this person was different. She wasn't the same person Kate had always known. It was all starting to make sense, but the pieces were still scattered. Who was this mysterious person? What was their connection to Charlotte? And how did they fit into the events of that night? Kate knew she had to find out. With renewed determination, Kate left the coffee shop, the answers she had been searching for just out of reach. But the first step had been taken, and she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth. Kate sat in her apartment the next morning, staring at the security guard's report once again. The details about the mysterious figure with Charlotte had haunted her all night. Who was this person, and why hadn't anyone else noticed them before? Charlotte had always been a private person, but she had never mentioned anyone that could have been involved in something like this. What was she hiding? After her meeting with Tom, the security guard, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of discovering something important. Tom had mentioned recognizing the person Charlotte was with, but the details were vague. The dark coat, the way Charlotte had acted, it was clear that Tom was holding back. But why? Was he scared? Or was there something more he wasn't telling her? The truth was, Kate couldn't stop thinking about how little information had been shared by the police and the legal team. Everyone seemed to have accepted the initial version of events without questioning the gaps in the story. The idea that Charlotte had been involved in an altercation and left the scene alone seemed far too simple. There had to be more to it, and Kate knew that if she didn't act fast, this mystery might slip through her fingers. She spent the morning researching the case again, combing through the police reports and trying to connect the dots. Charlotte's defense attorney had been focused on proving her innocence, but the missing piece of the puzzle was the unidentified person that Tom had witnessed. Kate couldn't help but feel that this person held the key to everything. Kate's mind kept circling back to one crucial detail: the timeline. According to Tom's report, Charlotte had left the gallery at 11:45 p.m., but the altercation didn't happen until later, around 1:00 a.m. So what had happened in those crucial 75 minutes? What had Charlotte been doing during that time? If someone else was with her, they might have information that could explain what really happened. But no one had bothered to follow up on this. Determined to find out more, Kate decided to meet with Tom again. She needed him to clarify his account and help her understand exactly what he had seen. But when she called him, Tom sounded hesitant. He agreed to meet, but his voice was strained, almost as if he were afraid of what might happen. It made Kate wonder if there was something more to his reluctance than just shyness. She had to get to the bottom of this. Later that afternoon, Kate arrived at the small coffee shop where she had first met Tom. She found a quiet corner and waited. She couldn't help but feel nervous. Every time she thought she was getting closer to the truth, she hit another wall. But she couldn't give up now. Charlotte needed her. Kate had to know the full story. When Tom finally arrived, he looked even more uneasy than before. He walked slowly, his eyes darting around the coffee shop as if he were worried someone might see him. Kate's heart sank. Was he in trouble? What had he seen that made him so afraid? She waved him over and he sat down without a word. For a moment there was silence between them. Kate wasn't sure where to start. She wanted to ask him everything at once, but she knew she had to approach this carefully. Tom wasn't just another witness. He had been there that night and his observations could change everything. Kate took a deep breath and spoke first. "I know this isn't easy, Tom," she said softly, "but I need you to tell me everything you remember. This is about my sister. If you know something, anything, it could help her. Please, Tom." Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. He opened his mouth but hesitated. Finally, he spoke in a low, almost inaudible voice. "I wish I could help more, but I don't know what good it'll do. I've already told you what I saw, but there's more to it. I didn't mention it before because I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to get mixed up in anything dangerous." Kate leaned forward. She was listening intently. This was the moment when everything could change. She couldn't afford to let him back out now. "What do you mean? What did you see, Tom?" She pressed gently, urging him to continue. Tom looked around the coffee shop again, his voice trembling slightly. I saw Charlotte with that person, the one I told you about. But there's something else, something strange. When they were talking, it wasn't just casual. I could tell Charlotte was scared. She was looking over her shoulder like she was trying to make sure no one was watching. That's when I started to get nervous. I had to step away, but I kept watching them from a distance. The person with her, they weren't just a stranger. I realized later I recognized them, but I didn't put it together until after everything happened. Kate's mind raced. She tried to process what Tom was saying, but it wasn't easy. So Charlotte had been scared, and this wasn't just any person she was with, it was someone Tom recognized. But why hadn't he mentioned it earlier? Why hadn't he told anyone? "Who was it, Tom?" Kate asked, her voice steady but urgent. Tom hesitated, his eyes filled with confusion and doubt. "I don't know if I should be the one to say this. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but..." It was someone from Charlotte's past. Someone she had known before all of this happened. Kate felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Charlotte had kept her past hidden from everyone, even from Kate. She had always been private about her life, but this was something new. Who could have been involved in a way that made her so nervous? And why hadn't Charlotte told Kate about them? "Tom, please," Kate said, her voice soft but insistent. "You have to tell me. This is important. What do you know?" Tom took a deep breath, his face pale. "It was a man named Jack. I didn't recognize him at first, but when I thought about it later, I remembered him from years ago. He was someone Charlotte used to know before she came to the gallery, but she hasn't mentioned him in years. I don't know what he was doing there or why she was with him, but something about their conversation didn't sit right with me. It felt off, you know, like they were involved in something and I wasn't supposed to see it." Kate's heart raced as she processed this new information. Jack, it was a name that sent a wave of unease through her. She had never heard Charlotte mention anyone named Jack, and yet here was this man, connected to the incident in a way Kate had never imagined. Why hadn't Charlotte told her about him? Why was she keeping this a secret? Tom continued, his voice trembling. "I don't know if Jack's involved in what happened that night, but I have a bad feeling about him. I didn't want to say anything, but I feel like I have to now. If he's the reason Charlotte was acting strange, then maybe he's connected to all of this. Maybe he's the reason she's in so much trouble." Kate sat back, her mind swirling with questions. She had always trusted her sister, but now she was realizing that there was so much more she didn't know. Charlotte had kept so much hidden, and Kate was starting to feel like she was just scratching the surface. But what was she supposed to do with this information? How could she prove that Jack had anything to do with the incident? And why had Charlotte kept him a secret? The more Kate thought about it, the more she realized that this was just the beginning. If Jack was really involved, then everything Charlotte had told her about that night might be a lie. But why? Why hadn't Charlotte trusted her with the truth? Was she trying to protect someone, or was there something darker at play? Kate knew one thing for sure: she had to find Jack. She had to understand what role he played in all of this, and she had to do it fast. Charlotte's freedom, and possibly her life, depended on the answers Kate would uncover in the coming days. This version continues the suspenseful and engaging style, while keeping the content clean and exciting. Let me know if you'd like to make further adjustments. Part 3, Co-expand Crow without heading 1800 words in simple English words. It should be interesting, and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. And don't use any violated word. Aviate any violated content, certainly. Here is the expanded version of Part 3 of the story, in simple English and 1800 words, engaging and free of any violated content. Kate couldn't shake the image of Tom's face as he had told her about Jack. The name echoed in her mind like a distant warning bell. Jack. Why hadn't Charlotte ever mentioned him? What had happened between them in the past that made her so secretive? Kate could feel the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on her chest. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that Jack was the missing piece of this entire puzzle. After her conversation with Tom, Kate spent the next few days trying to piece together everything she had learned. She couldn't rely on the legal team for answers. They were too focused on building a defense based on the limited evidence. But Kate knew there was more to Charlotte's story. She could feel it deep in her gut. And she was determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter how difficult it might be. The first thing Kate did was start digging into Charlotte's past. She spent hours combing through old letters, emails, and any other piece of communication she could find. Charlotte had always been a private person, but she hadn't been entirely secretive. She had kept a journal for years, and Kate knew where it was hidden. It had always been a way for Charlotte to express her thoughts and feelings when she didn't want to share them with anyone else. Kate had never read it before, but she knew it might hold the answers she was looking for. When Kate opened the journal, she found it filled with detailed accounts of Charlotte's life, her hopes, dreams, fears, and the people who had come and gone in her life. But as she flipped through the pages, she found no mention of Jack. There were no clues, no hints, nothing that even remotely suggested Charlotte had been involved with someone by that name. It was as if Jack had been erased from her memory entirely. The more Kate read, the more confused she became. Was Charlotte hiding something? Had she truly buried this part of her past so deep that even Kate couldn't uncover it? Frustrated but not ready to give up, Kate decided to visit the place where Charlotte had worked before the gallery, a small cafe that Charlotte had once owned with a former business partner. Kate had visited the cafe a few times over the years, but it had been closed down for a while now. Charlotte had sold it a year before the incident, but Kate remembered that she had mentioned Jack in passing a couple of times when they were talking about the old days. Maybe she could learn something about their relationship from people who had known them both. As she walked into the empty cafe, the familiar scent of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air. It was quiet, with only the sound of her footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. The place still had the same charm it had when Charlotte ran it, but there was something different now. The space felt colder, emptier, like it had been abandoned in more ways than one. Kate felt a pang of sadness as she remembered the laughter and warmth that had once filled the cafe, but she pushed those emotions aside. She had a job to do. Kate approached the counter and noticed the owner, a middle-aged man named Paul, wiping down the surface. He looked up when she walked in, his face lighting up with recognition. "Kate, it's been a long time," Paul said, smiling warmly. "What brings you here?" "I'm looking for some information about Charlotte," Kate replied, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I know she worked here before, and I was hoping you might be able to tell me something about her past." Paul's smile faltered slightly, and he looked around the cafe as if he was searching for the right words. "Well, Charlotte was always a bit of a mystery. She kept to herself, but she was a good partner. We worked well together, and I was sad to see her go. Why do you want to know?" Kate hesitated. She didn't want to push too hard, but she knew she had to get to the truth. "I'm trying to understand more about what happened." About her life before everything changed. Did she ever talk about someone named Jack? Did she have a relationship with him? At the mention of Jack's name, Paul's expression changed. He looked down at the counter, avoiding Kate's gaze. I didn't know much about Jack, he said slowly, his voice quiet. He wasn't really a part of the cafe. He came around a few times, but it was clear that he wasn't someone Charlotte was close with. She didn't like to talk about him. All I know is that he seemed different. Maybe that's why she kept him at arm's length. Kate's curiosity piqued. Different how? Paul shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if I should be saying this, but there was something about Jack that made people uneasy. He wasn't the kind of person you'd want to invite into your life. He was intense, always seemed like he was hiding something. And Charlotte, well, she never mentioned him after she sold the cafe. But I know she was trying to get away from him. That much was obvious. Kate's heart began to race. It seemed like Jack wasn't just some distant acquaintance. There was something more going on. But what was it? Why had Charlotte kept him hidden from everyone, even her closest friends? And why had she been trying to get away from him? Do you know where I can find him? Kate asked, her voice firm with determination. I need to talk to him. It's important. Paul looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. I'm not sure, but I heard he's been living in a small apartment on the east side of town. It's not much, just a dingy place, but that's where I last heard he was staying. Kate's mind was already racing. She thanked Paul and left the cafe, her thoughts consumed by the new information she had just learned. Jack was living nearby. She could find him. She had to find him. But as she drove toward the east side of town, a sense of unease settled in her stomach. What if she was digging too deep? What if she was uncovering things that were better left buried? She tried to push those thoughts aside. Charlotte's life was on the line, and she had to do whatever it took to get to the truth. But as Kate arrived at the building where Jack was supposed to be living, she felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. The building was old, run down, and it looked like it hadn't been properly maintained in years. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was chipped and faded. It wasn't the kind of place someone would choose to live willingly. Kate parked her car a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way. Her footsteps echoed in the empty streets as she approached the building. She hesitated for a moment before walking through the front door. The lobby was dimly lit and smelled of mildew. She made her way up the narrow staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but she knew she had to see this through. When she reached the second floor, she found the apartment she was looking for. The door was slightly ajar, and Kate could hear faint noises coming from inside. She took a deep breath and knocked lightly on the door. There was no response. She knocked again, this time louder. Still nothing. Kate's curiosity got the best of her, and she slowly pushed the door open. What she saw inside stopped her dead in her tracks. Kate stood frozen at the doorway, her heart hammering in her chest. The apartment was dim, with only a small light coming from a lamp in the corner. As her eyes adjusted to the low light, she could see that the room was cluttered, with papers, empty bottles, and discarded clothes scattered across the floor. It wasn't just an old apartment. It was a place that looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. But there was something even more unsettling about it. There was a sense of neglect, of a life that had been left behind, and Kate couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the place someone would willingly stay. The noises she had heard earlier were faint, like the sound of something shifting, but as she looked around the apartment, she saw no movement. Her eyes lingered on the corner where the light seemed to flicker slightly. And then she saw him. Jack was sitting in a worn-out armchair, his face partially hidden in the shadows. His posture was stiff, as if he was aware of her presence, but he didn't move. He didn't even look up when she stepped further into the room. Kate's breath caught in her throat. There was something off about him. He looked different from the image she had imagined. His clothes were ragged, and his eyes, when they finally met hers, were tired, almost vacant. He seemed like a man who had seen too much, a man who had lived through things that Kate could hardly comprehend. She didn't know what to say at first. There were so many questions racing through her mind. Why had Charlotte been with him? What had happened between them all those years ago? Why had Charlotte hidden him from everyone, even Kate? She had always trusted her sister, but now everything felt like it was crumbling around her. "Jack," Kate said, her voice sounding smaller than she intended. "I need to talk to you." Jack's eyes flickered as if he was weighing her words, but he remained silent for a long moment. Then, with a low sigh, he finally spoke. "You're Charlotte's sister, aren't you?" His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it much. "I've been expecting you." Kate took a step forward, her mind spinning. "You've been expecting me? What do you mean?" Jack didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in the chair, looking at the ceiling as though he were thinking about something far away. "I knew this day would come," he muttered. "I didn't want it to, but I knew it would." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. What was he talking about? Why was he acting like he knew she would come looking for him? What had happened between him and Charlotte that had led to this moment? "Why did you disappear from her life?" Kate asked, her voice firmer now. "Why didn't Charlotte ever tell me about you? Why was she trying to get away from you?" Jack's gaze finally shifted to her. His eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of something else in them, regret maybe, or guilt. He sighed deeply and shook his head. "Charlotte never wanted anyone to know about me," he said softly. "Not even you. We had a history, a complicated one. She didn't want to drag you into it. She didn't want you to know what I was really like." Kate's mind was racing. She had known Charlotte had a past, but she never imagined it involved someone like Jack. "What do you mean? What did you do to her?" Jack's face hardened at the question, his eyes darkening. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "It's not what you think. I didn't hurt her, not like you're imagining, but I was. Part of a world she didn't belong to. A world I was trying to leave, but couldn't. Charlotte tried to escape that world, and I tried to help her, but it was too late." Kate stepped closer, her heart racing. "What world? What are you talking about? What did you do to her?" Jack stopped pacing and turned to face her. His expression softened, almost as if he were ashamed. "Charlotte and we were involved in things that were dangerous. I was trying to get out, but she got caught up in it too. And then, when she tried to walk away, people didn't just let her go. They kept coming after her. I was the one who brought that danger into her life." Kate felt a surge of confusion and anger. "What kind of danger? What were you involved in?" Jack looked down at the floor, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was involved in some bad things. I made some poor choices, and I ended up tied up with people who were much worse than I was. I tried to shield Charlotte from it, but I couldn't. She got dragged into it, and I couldn't protect her." Kate's mind was spinning. What was he saying? What kind of life had Charlotte been living before she left this behind? Why hadn't she ever told Kate about any of this? Kate felt like she was losing her grip on everything she thought she knew. Her sister had been living in a world full of secrets, a world that Kate couldn't even begin to understand. "Why did you leave?" Kate asked, her voice strained. "Why did you disappear from her life if you cared about her?" Jack's eyes flickered with something like pain. "Because I was dangerous for her, because the people I was involved with would have hurt her if they knew I was still in her life. I had to walk away to keep her safe, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't stay away for long." "Did you hurt her?" Kate demanded, her voice rising. "Did you do anything to her? Was she hiding from you?" Jack's face twisted in anguish, and he shook his head. "No, I would never hurt her, but I couldn't stop the people who were after her. They didn't care about me leaving. They wanted her. They wanted her to pay for what I had done." Kate felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. The pieces were starting to come together, but they didn't make any sense. Jack wasn't the villain she had imagined, but the danger Charlotte had been running from was real. Whoever had been after Jack had dragged Charlotte into this mess, and now it seemed like they were both paying the price. "Why didn't Charlotte tell me?" Kate whispered. "Why didn't she trust me with the truth?" Jack looked at her, his face filled with sorrow. "Because she was trying to protect you. She knew you wouldn't understand. She didn't want you to get involved. She loved you too much." Kate felt her chest tighten. She had always thought that Charlotte had kept things from her because she didn't trust her. But now she realized Charlotte had been protecting her all along. And now, because of Jack and the world he had brought into her life, Charlotte was paying the price. Kate took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What happened that night?" she asked quietly. "What was Charlotte doing with you?" Jack's face grew even more troubled. "She came to me that night because she was scared. She knew something was coming. She knew the people I had been involved with were getting closer, and she didn't know who else to turn to. We were talking when the others showed up. They were after me, but they found her instead." Kate's heart sank. "Is that why she's been accused of the crime? Because they tried to make her pay for what you did?" Jack nodded grimly. "They didn't care about her. They just wanted to use her as a pawn to get to me. But Charlotte didn't deserve any of this. She didn't deserve what happened." Kate's mind raced with the implications of Jack's words. Charlotte had been caught in the middle of something far bigger than she had ever realized. This wasn't just about a mistake Charlotte made. This was about a dangerous world she had been forced into. And now, Kate was left to figure out how to untangle the web of lies and deception that had trapped her sister. Kate took a deep breath, standing tall. "I'm going to help her, Jack. I'm going to make sure she gets out of this. You owe it to her." Jack's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them. "I wish I could help you more, but I've already done enough damage. You're the only one who can fix this now." Kate nodded. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let Charlotte go down without a fight.